It was early November, and Lisa had just moved into a new city after landing a job at a tech firm. It was supposed to be a fresh start, away from the stress of her old life. She found a small, cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood, and the first few weeks felt like a dream. But that changed one evening. Lisa had been home alone after a long day at work, settling in with a cup of tea and scrolling through social media. She saw an unusual message pop up in her inbox, one she didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You're invited." Confused, she opened it. The message was short. "Join us for a private gathering tonight at 8 p.m. Details to follow. You're already on the guest list. Don't miss out." The invitation looked like something sent from an exclusive event, maybe even a work-related one. Lisa didn't remember signing up for anything, but it seemed legitimate. The email included a strange link with a brief address and a time. She hesitated for a moment but figured it wouldn't hurt to check it out. At 7:30 p.m., Lisa prepared herself. The building wasn't far from her apartment, and she figured she'd take a quick walk over. She wasn't sure what to expect, but the thought of meeting some new people intrigued her. When she arrived, she noticed something strange. The building looked entirely normal, but it had a subtle, almost eerie air about it. There were no signs or markings on the door, just the address she had received in the email. It felt oddly isolated. No cars parked outside, no lights on in the windows. Just a lonely building in a darkened corner of the street. Lisa stood at the entrance for a moment, debating whether she should go inside. Maybe it's just a weird, exclusive gathering, she muttered to herself. The curiosity won out. She stepped inside and found herself in a dimly lit lobby. It looked more like an abandoned building than a trendy event space. The cold, sterile air made her feel uncomfortable, but she pressed on. The hallway stretched out ahead, illuminated only by faint overhead lights. After walking for what felt like an eternity, Lisa arrived at an old wooden door at the end of the hall. A small handwritten note was taped to it, reading, "Enter at your own risk. The party starts at 8 p.m. She opened the door to find a large, empty room with a single table in the center, draped in black cloth. The table was surrounded by chairs, each facing away from her. As Lisa stepped in, she realized there was no music, no chatter, no sign of any guests. Just silence. Before she could turn around and leave, the door behind her slammed shut. Frozen, Lisa tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The room had an unnatural chill to it now, and the silence was deafening. The only sound she could hear was the faint ticking of a clock somewhere in the room, though she couldn't see it. At that moment, a voice came from behind the chairs. "You've been waiting for this, haven't you?" Lisa jumped, her heart racing. She couldn't see anyone, but the voice was clear, calm. It seemed to echo around the room. "Who's there?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. The voice spoke again, this time more softly. "Come closer. We're waiting for you." A chill ran down her spine, and she didn't want to move forward, but something about the voice compelled her. Slowly, she stepped closer to the table. As she did, the chairs around it began to creak, as if someone had just sat down in them, though the figures were still out of sight. Lisa's mind raced. Should she leave? She pulled out her phone to check the time. 8:03 p.m. The event had started, but where were the other guests? Suddenly, she felt a sharp tap on her shoulder. She spun around, heart pounding, but found no one behind her. Her breath quickened as she backed away, nearly stumbling into the table. The voices grew louder now, coming from all directions. "You're in the wrong place." Lisa's phone buzzed in her hand. She looked at the screen. Another email from the same address. "You didn't think this was a party, did you? You've been invited to something much more important. You're part of the game now." Her hands shook as she stared at the message. Panic rose in her chest as she realized something was terribly wrong. The walls felt like they were closing in, and the room seemed to distort around her. A figure finally stood up from one of the chairs, tall, thin, and dressed in dark clothes. Their face was hidden under a hood, but the air felt suffocating. "Leave now, and you'll forget everything," the figure whispered. Lisa's heart raced. She had to get out. She lunged for the door, slamming into it with all her strength, but it wouldn't open. The voices were becoming louder, echoing, disorienting. She turned back to see the hooded figure step closer, their hands reaching out to her. "Why are you doing this?" Lisa screamed, backing up in terror. The figure's hand reached out and touched her arm. She could feel ice-cold energy pulse through her body. The room seemed to dissolve into shadows, and in that moment, everything went black. Lisa awoke in her apartment, drenched in sweat, her phone in hand. She looked around, disoriented, unsure if what she had experienced was a nightmare. It was 11:30 p.m. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the same email address. "It's never over. You'll be invited again soon." Lisa dropped her phone in horror. She remembered the faces, the voices, and the cold grip of the figure. The invitation had been real, and now she was part of something far darker than she could ever have imagined. The lights in her apartment flickered. A remote cabin, isolated deep in the woods. The protagonist, Olivia, has recently moved in after a tough breakup and is seeking solitude. It's winter and the weather is harsh, with heavy snowfall and freezing temperatures. Her only neighbors are miles away. The cabin is old but cozy, surrounded by trees and an unnerving silence. Olivia sits in her small, rustic living room, a fire crackling in the stone fireplace. She's holding a mug of tea, staring out of the large window. Snow falls heavily outside, blanketing the landscape in white. The silence is almost suffocating. "I moved out here to get away from it all, to breathe, to think. The city was too much, too loud, too fast. Here I can just be. But it's strange, isn't it? How silence can feel like something's watching you." She sips her tea and glances out of the window again, shivering. A flicker of movement catches her eye. She looks closer but sees nothing, just the trees and snow. She shrugs it off and goes back to her tea. Later that evening, the wind howls outside as snow slaps against the windows. Olivia has just finished dinner and is getting ready for bed. She walks through the cabin, dimming the lights, and then heads upstairs to her bedroom. She takes one last look out of the window, the snow swirling in the darkness. The trees loom like dark shadows in the distance. But then a flash of something catches her eye. Movement. A figure standing in the snow, just outside her window, watching. Olivia's heart skips a beat. She rushes over to the window, but the figure is gone. Was I seeing things? She backs away from the window, uneasy, and hurries to bed, locking the window and drawing the curtains tightly shut. The next morning, Olivia is awake early. She checks the time, 6:30 a.m. She feels a gnawing sense of discomfort, but brushes it off as paranoia. The storm has passed, but the snow still falls in heavy flakes. As she goes about her morning routine, she hears a thudding sound coming from outside, like something or someone is walking through the snow. Olivia pauses, straining her ears. It's coming closer. She walks to the window again and peeks out. This time she sees footprints in the fresh snow leading up to her cabin door. Who the hell is out there? She grabs a coat and heads to the door. The cold hits her immediately as she steps outside. The footprints continue up to her front step, then disappear. The ground is undisturbed beyond her door. She looks around, but there's no one, just the eerie silence of the woods. Maybe it's just a lost hiker or someone from the next property over. But something doesn't feel right. She hurries back inside, locking the door behind her. That night, the storm returns. The wind howls against the cabin, and the snow intensifies. Olivia is curled up on the couch with a blanket, trying to distract herself with a book. But the sounds from outside make it hard to concentrate. The thudding noise returns, but this time it's closer. The air is thick with tension. Olivia places the book down and quietly walks to the window. She looks out. In the dim light of the snowstorm, she sees a shadow standing outside, just beyond the porch. The figure is tall and still, but there's something unnatural about it, like it's just standing there, watching her. What the hell do you want? The figure doesn't move. Olivia's hand trembles as she reaches for her phone, about to dial 911. But before she can, the figure disappears into the dark woods. She waits for a long moment, hoping the figure won't return. But when she turns to leave, she hears a faint sound, a scratching at the window. Her heart drops. Slowly, she turns around. There's a shadowy face pressed against the window, its eyes wide, unblinking, staring directly at her. Panic sets in. Olivia backs away from the window, stumbling over furniture as she rushes to the door. She locks it, grabs a kitchen knife from the counter, and hides in the closet. Her breath is shallow, her hands shaking. She hears the sound of footsteps again, crunching in the snow, getting closer. It sounds like someone is walking around the cabin, circling it. Olivia's pulse quickens. She can't see the person, but she knows they're there. The air is thick with dread. Her mind races. Should she call the police? Should she just leave? She glances at the window from the small crack in the closet door. The figure is there again, staring into the house, not moving. It feels as though time is standing still. Suddenly, the door handle jiggles. Olivia freezes. A voice, low, rough, and distorted, whispers through the crack in the door. "I know you're in there." Olivia's heart pounds in her chest. She's too scared to breathe. The voice continues. "I just want to talk. I can see you." The door handle rattles again. Olivia tightens her grip on the knife, and her knuckles are white. She takes one final deep breath and then bursts from the closet, running for the door. She yanks the door open and races out into the snowstorm, not knowing where to go, but only knowing she has to get away. Her heart thunders in her chest as she stumbles through the deep snow, her breath freezing in the cold air. As she looks back, she sees the figure standing in the doorway, just watching her, unmoving. Olivia runs, the snow biting at her skin, the storm whipping around her. But she doesn't stop. She doesn't know how long she's been running, but she doesn't care. She's just trying to survive. Finally, she spots headlights in the distance, a car driving down the road. She waves her arms frantically, screaming for help. The car pulls over, and the driver, a man in his 50s, looks at her with concern. "Man, are you all right? What are you doing out here? Please, you have to help me. There's someone in my house." The man hesitates but then nods, motioning for her to get in. Olivia jumps into the car, shivering uncontrollably. She looks back at her cabin, but the figure is gone. As the car drives away, Olivia watches the woods fade into the storm behind her. She is safe for now, but she can't shake the feeling that the man is still out there, watching her, waiting for the right moment. "I thought I was safe, but in the woods, you can never truly know if you're alone." I was house-sitting for my uncle while he was out of town for a business trip. His place was a 2-story house on the outskirts of the city, backed up against a thick stretch of forest. It was quiet, secluded, the kind of place that felt safe but also made you hyper-aware of how alone you were. He left on a Thursday, and I settled in easily enough. I worked from my laptop during the day and watched movies at night. Simple, easy. That Friday evening, it started raining. One of those relentless, heavy downpours that rattled against the windows and turned the backyard into a pool of black water. I didn't think much of it at first. I grabbed a snack, curled up on the couch, and let the storm play its soundtrack in the background. Then at exactly 9:17 p.m., the landline rang. I frowned. My uncle had a landline, but he never used it. I debated ignoring it, but something about the way it rang, sharp and insistent, made me uneasy. I picked up. Silence. Not the normal kind of silence either. It was deep, static-filled, like whoever was on the other end was breathing but not speaking. "Hello?" I said. A beat passed, then another. And then, just before I could hang up, a voice, soft, almost whispering, murmured, "Can I come in?" The call cut off before I could react. My stomach twisted uncomfortably. Probably a prank, someone messing around. But I still made sure the doors were locked before heading back to my movie. At around 11 p.m., just as I was about to go to bed, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number. "I see you." My chest tightened. I hesitated before responding. "Who is this?" No reply. I got up and checked the windows, peering through the rain-streaked glass. The backyard was empty, just the forest beyond, shifting and swaying in the wind. I tried to shake it off as a joke, probably one of my friends messing with me. I turned off the lights and went to bed. At 2:42 a.m., I woke up to the sound of something creaking downstairs. I froze, my heart hammering. I lay there, straining my ears. The house settled sometimes, sure, but this sound was different. Slow, purposeful, like footsteps. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, creeping toward the bedroom door. The hallway was dark, and the faintest sliver of light from the street lamp outside cast eerie shadows across the floor. I held my breath and listened. Another creak, closer this time. I stepped back into my room and locked the door. My pulse pounded as I texted my uncle. "Hey, is someone supposed to be here?" "I think I hear footsteps downstairs." No response. I sat there for what felt like forever, ears straining for any more sounds. But everything was still. No movement, no voices. Then, just as I started to think I'd imagined it, I saw the doorknob twitch. I stopped breathing. The metal handle jerked again, harder this time. I scrambled back, heart in my throat, clutching my phone like a lifeline. A slow, deliberate knock followed. I couldn't move, couldn't even blink. I stared at the door, waiting, praying for whoever was on the other side to leave. Then a voice, low, distorted, like it was trying to sound human but failing. "You left the back door unlocked." Cold terror shot through me. My stomach dropped as I realized I had locked the doors earlier. I was sure of it. But in my rush to check the windows after the text, I might have forgotten the back one. The knocking stopped. And then, silence. The kind that stretched out, pressing into my ears, making me hyper-aware of every breath I took. I didn't sleep. I sat there, curled in a ball on my bed, gripping my phone until the first light of dawn spilled through the curtains. Only then did I dare to move. I slowly, carefully unlocked my door and crept down the stairs. The house was still, empty. But when I reached the back door, my stomach twisted painfully. It was wide open. I checked every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. But I found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no muddy footprints, nothing. Just before I called my uncle, I noticed my phone buzz again. Another message from the same unknown number.